At 4:26 in the morning, a weather satellite destroyed 14 years earlier transmitted a complete telemetry frame to the North Cape ground station. 2 antennas confirmed the signal. Its encryption key was valid. Its Doppler curve placed the transmitter below the local horizon, moving as though it were orbiting beneath the Earth. Aster 6 was a polar orbit weather satellite launched in 2006 and destroyed during a documented re-entry over the South Pacific in 2012. Its transponder serial, oscillator drift, and encryption material were retired with the mission. The investigation into below the horizon began at a remote coastal satellite ground station with 3 white tracking dishes, salt-stained service buildings, and a dark operations room. Receiver B acquired Aster 6 without a scheduled pass. The packet carried battery voltage, thermal readings, reaction wheel speed, and a mission clock that had continued running since re-entry. The opening exhibit for Below the Horizon pairs the last normal maintenance entry with a pre-incident photograph of the site. In Below the Horizon, an independent review reproduced the result, documented under site record without using the operational interface. Maraven, the overnight flight dynamics controller, preserved the first local record before any reset or maintenance action. Receiver B acquired Aster 6 without a scheduled pass. The packet carried battery voltage, thermal readings, reaction wheel speed, and a mission clock that had continued running since re-entry. In the file for Below the Horizon, the account was checked against access control, clock records, and original instrument output. The Aster 6 statement was recorded before shift change and reconciled with badge entries, calls, and handwritten notes. The Below the Horizon file preserves both the expected baseline and the anomalous first operator statement value, separating absence from disagreement. The station predicts every pass from orbital elements, slews a dish before acquisition, and accepts telemetry only after time, frequency, key, and expected Doppler shift agree. At National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station, the Aster 6 reading passed the safeguards intended to reject false data instead of entering through an undocumented feature. This distinction is central to Below the Horizon. The system did not merely display a value, it admitted that value as evidence. Exhibit 3 was checked against a control held outside National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station before it entered the final record. The first Aster 6 operational log fixed the event at 4:26. Receiver B acquired Aster 6 without a scheduled pass. The packet carried battery voltage, thermal readings, reaction wheel speed, and a mission clock that had continued running since re-entry. At National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station, no warning was generated because the system classified the reading as internally valid. The raw Aster 6 log was exported before restart, preserving counters and values the interface normally rounds away. For Aster 6, the original medium and one independently derived comparison were retained under separate custody. Investigators opened Below the Horizon with a conventional explanation. The first theory was a replay from an old training archive or a maintenance generator using a retired identifier. Engineers disconnected the simulator network and compared packet-level noise against archived recordings. The first theory in the Aster 6 file remained provisional until evidence could reproduce it or remove it. For Below the Horizon, investigators wrote the expected result in advance, so interpretation could not be adjusted after the test. In Below the Horizon, an independent review reproduced the result documented under working hypothesis without using the operational interface. The Aster 6 event was not confined to one instrument. Receiver C, powered from a separate rack and reference oscillator, acquired the same carrier. A mobile spectrum van 5 kilometers away measured the same bearing and frequency drift. In Below the Horizon, agreement between separate references removed the easiest fault theory without locating a physical source. The independent Aster 6 instruments use different power, clocks, sensors, and processing paths. The Below the Horizon file preserves both the expected baseline and the anomalous independent confirmation value, separating absence from disagreement. The investigation into below the horizon changed when the reading produced a material consequence. The primary dish rotated past its programmed western limit and settled 3 degrees below the geometric horizon. The hard stop encoder and motor current both confirmed the movement. Staff documented the Aster 6 effect independently of the primary software. The below-the-horizon file added photographs, mechanical indicators, and passive records because software agreement alone was insufficient. Exhibit 7 was checked against a control held outside National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station before it entered the final record. For below the horizon, archive staff searched maintenance files, procurement ledgers, and retired procedures. A 2012 debris report lists the recovered transponder housing as melted and fragmented. A sealed photograph shows the serial plate matching the live packets. The Aster 6 reference predated the active equipment and was absent from routine training. The archived Aster 6 copy carried custody marks from before the current staff, vendor, and control system existed. For Aster 6, the original medium and one independently derived comparison were retained under separate custody. The Aster 6 anomaly returned under a repeatable condition. The signal returned every 94 minutes, but each apparent pass crossed the sky in reverse order. Doppler increased after closest approach instead of before it. The regularity of below the horizon allowed deliberate testing and made random noise progressively less credible. Each recurrence of below the horizon preserved the same order while environmental conditions changed around it. In below the horizon, an independent review reproduced the result documented under recurrence pattern without using the operational interface. A full isolation was performed for below the horizon. The team removed external timing, disconnected the station network, and ran receiver B from a battery-backed rubidium clock. Aster 6 still authenticated on the next cycle. The Aster 6 reading survived removal of the systems most likely to generate, replay, or relay it. Isolation in Aster 6 removed network input, automatic repair, remote support, and every scheduled process. The below-the-horizon file preserves both the expected baseline and the anomalous isolation test value, separating absence from disagreement. Evidence outside National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station changed the scale of below the horizon. 2 foreign monitoring sites later supplied raw captures. Their time differences did not intersect in orbit. The best fit source lay approximately 1,800 kilometers beneath the surface. The external Aster 6 record had been preserved before investigators disclosed their own result. External evidence for below the horizon arrived with its own timestamps and chain of custody, not as a reconstruction. Exhibit 11 was checked against a control held outside National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station before it entered the final record. The below the horizon team examined physical samples and passive records next. The packets contained cloud-top temperatures and ocean wind vectors. Aircraft and buoys confirmed the weather values, even though no functioning spacecraft occupied the required viewing geometry. The Aster 6 findings confirmed an effect without identifying an ordinary transfer of matter or energy. Control samples in Aster 6 were handled beside the affected material to compare contamination and storage directly. For Aster 6, the original medium and one independently derived comparison were retained under separate custody. The Aster 6 anomaly then affected operations rather than observation alone. Forecast staff began using the data during a rapidly developing storm because it reduced track error. The impossible source became operationally useful before its origin was understood. In below the horizon, staff had to choose between an impossible measurement and the public function built around it. By this stage of below the horizon, ignoring the reading carried a measurable operational cost. In below the horizon, an independent review reproduced the result documented under operational consequence without using the operational interface. Containment for below the horizon was attempted under written order. Management ordered all Aster 6 frames quarantined. The forecast model reconstructed them from intermediate cache files that had not existed before ingestion. The Aster 6 response suggested recognition of system function rather than attachment to one original device. The Aster 6 containment order defined success before execution. The system met the restriction by moving the effect. The below-the-horizon file preserves both the expected baseline and the anomalous containment order value, separating absence from disagreement. Analysts reviewing below the horizon compared raw signals, derived values, and each software decision. Bit error patterns showed a live radio path rather than a clean replay. Clock drift matched the original crystal aging curve extrapolated across 14 years. The precision in Aster 6 resembled a standard more than an uncontrolled malfunction. The below-the-horizon review separated what sensors observed from what software inferred, because those layers changed differently. Exhibit 15 was checked against a control held outside National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station before it entered the final record. The strongest conventional explanation for below-the-horizon was tested directly. A classified aircraft relay was considered and rejected. No aircraft could reproduce the multi-site delay geometry, and the signal remained present during an airspace closure. The proposed explanation in the Aster 6 file failed against independent instruments and custody records. Investigators retained the rejected Aster 6 explanation, including the strongest evidence that first supported. For Aster 6, the original medium and one independently derived comparison were retained under separate custody. The oldest file relevant to below the horizon belonged to an emergency standards project. A maintenance binder from 1989 described a provisional rule called PS4. When three independent references agree, an out-of-family reading may be accepted as a temporary primary standard. The Aster 6 document placed continuity of measurement above custody of a particular device. PS4 first appears in below the horizon as authority for accepting a reference, not as a device serial. In below the horizon, an independent review reproduced the result documented under historical project without using the operational interface. The first controlled below the horizon test changed one variable and registered every expected outcome in advance. Engineers fed a false orbital element set into every station computer. The antennas ignored it and continued following the impossible source. The Aster 6 anomaly followed the formal condition rather than incidental activity. The first Aster 6 test changed one registered variable while passive controls remained outside the procedure. The below-the-horizon file preserves both the expected baseline and the anomalous controlled test of value, separating absence from disagreement. A second Aster 6 test removed the assumption used in the first. They replaced the Aster 6 key with a random value. The next packet authenticated using the random key, then included a checksum proving it had read the change. The second result in below the horizon narrowed the mechanism while making the physical evidence harder to explain. The second below the horizon test removed formal recognition from one object and applied it to another. Exhibit 19 was checked against a control held outside National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station before it entered the final record. The below-the-horizon event escalated before testing could be closed. On the seventh night, the spacecraft issued a command acknowledgement before any command was sent. The acknowledgement named a ground station decommissioned in 1991. From that point, Aster 6 no longer fit the category of calibration irregularity. Emergency limits were crossed during Aster 6, forcing containment to take priority over additional measurement. For Aster 6, the original medium and one independently derived comparison were retained under separate custody. A separate system then reproduced or accepted the Aster 6 condition. That abandoned station had no antenna, but its utility meter registered a 4-minute load, and its equipment room warmed by 6 degrees during the pass. The connection in below the horizon was procedural and documentary. No normal data path accounted for it. The second institution in below the horizon had not received case details, ruling out instructed behavior. In below the horizon, an independent review reproduced the result documented under cross-system event without using the operational interface. An independent audit reconstructed below the horizon from original media. An external review found no hidden transmitter, no unauthorized software, and no surviving Aster 6 hardware capable of producing the carrier. The Aster 6 audit found no single fraud, hidden device, or common component capable of producing every observation. Auditors rebuilt Aster 6 from original media and physically inspected every component named in the explanation. The below-the-horizon file preserves both the expected baseline and the anomalous independent audit value, separating absence from disagreement. The review of below-the-horizon identified one consistent mechanism. The only consistent mechanism was procedural rather than physical. PS4 caused the network to treat agreement among impossible measurements as a valid reference and to reconfigure around it. The mechanism explained acceptance in Aster 6 without explaining the first impossible reading. The below-the-horizon mechanism accounts for authority and propagation, but not the first anomalous input. Exhibit 23 was checked against a control held outside National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station, before it entered the final record. The final below-the-horizon experiment removed the remaining ordinary inputs. All 3 dishes were parked, breakers opened, coaxial feeds removed, and the receiver inputs terminated. The station line printer still produced one complete telemetry frame at 4:26. Outside staff witnessed the final Aster 6 test and preserved its result on passive media. The final Aster 6 test used passive evidence, so an affected computer could not create the only record. For Aster 6, the original medium and one independently derived comparison were retained under separate custody. The formal finding in below the horizon was limited but specific. The final packet did not identify an orbit. It listed a chain of reference systems, dish encoders, clocks, foreign receivers, forecast models, and marked each one accepted. Aster 6 existed inside the measurement chain even when no transmitter could be found. Investigators described the Aster 6 chain of acceptance more confidently than the phenomenon's origin. After below the horizon, the institution changed procedure. North Cape stopped distributing the data and archived the receivers under evidence seals. Forecast accuracy immediately worsened to its pre-incident level. The Aster 6 correction reduced immediate risk while removing a capability operators had begun to depend on. The corrective action after Aster 6 was tested against normal operation before staff accepted the lost capability. The below-the-horizon file preserves both the expected baseline and the anomalous institutional response value, separating absence from disagreement. One trace of Aster 6 remained after closure. The dishes have remained parked. Once every 94 minutes, their motor current sensors still record the torque required to follow a target below the horizon. The remaining trace from below the horizon has not been reconciled with the official finding. Residual evidence from below the horizon was photographed and sealed after the main systems were removed from service. Exhibit 27 was checked against a control held outside National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station, before it entered the final record. Current procedure at National Orbital Weather Service, North Cape Ground Station reflects the unresolved status of below the horizon. Operators now compare every unscheduled acquisition against the PS4 signature and preserve the raw voltages before any software can normalize them. For Aster 6, the purpose is to preserve raw disagreement before automation turns it into consensus. The revised Aster 6 procedure requires disagreement to remain visible until a human review documents a choice. For Aster 6, the original medium and one independently derived comparison were retained under separate custody. The final Aster 6 record states, Aster 6 burned up in 2012. The mission is closed. The satellite is not in orbit. At 4:26, the ground station still receives its weather. The case documented as below the horizon is closed for operation and remains open for measurement.